The worst part about being diminished by the people who are supposed to love you isn't the cruelty of their words, it is the casual ease with which they deliver them. At my own sister's engagement dinner, under the soft glow of fairy lights, her laughter cut through the chatter as she announced to the table that I was merely a low-level clerk at the city courthouse. A few relatives chuckled, glasses clinked, and my chest burned with a familiar, suffocating heat. But this time, her polished fiancé paused, tilting his head as he studied my face with sudden intensity. He asked what I actually did there, and instead of defending myself or offering a lengthy explanation, I simply uttered a single syllable. My name is Clara, and for my entire life, my family has relied on comfortable, tiny labels to keep me exactly where they wanted me. My older sister Vanessa was always the undisputed star of the family, possessing the kind of dazzling, magnetic charm that naturally made her the center of every universe she entered. I, on the other hand, was cast as the quiet, unremarkable sibling who held a forgettable position at the municipal building. That specific phrase became a permanent fixture at every Thanksgiving table and holiday gathering, a polite way for my relatives to acknowledge my existence before quickly shifting their focus back to Vanessa's glittering accomplishments. They never truly understood that my silence was a deliberate shield, crafted carefully over the years to maintain harmony in a household that couldn't handle my success. Whenever I tried to share details about my career, my parents' eyes would glaze over, and Vanessa would subtly steer the conversation back to her own milestones. I learned very early on that my achievements made them uncomfortable, so I chose to round out my sharp edges and let them believe in the diminished version of me. It kept the peace during Sunday dinners, where my voice was regularly drowned out by the scraping of forks and the pouring of more wine. The only person who ever saw through the facade was my cousin, Chloe, who noticed the exhausting hours I kept and the urgent phone calls that disrupted my weekends. She possessed a rare understanding of my true reality, occasionally squeezing my hand under the dinner table as a silent reminder that my worth wasn't defined by their ignorance. I constantly told myself that I didn't need their validation to feel successful, but that was a lie I used to numb the sting. Every single time Vanessa used my career as a punchline to elevate her own status, a knot of quiet, heavy clarity tightened deep within my stomach. By the time the engagement celebration arrived, I had already mentally prepared myself for the exact role I was expected to play throughout the evening. I arrived an hour early, quietly stepping into the background to organize catering platters and wipe down cocktail tables while my mother frantically managed the decorations. When Vanessa finally made her grand entrance alongside her wealthy fiancé, Julian, the backyard erupted into a flurry of camera flashes and breathless compliments. Julian was a prominent corporate litigator, a refined and observant man who moved through the elite crowd with a calm, understated confidence that commanded immediate respect. During the cocktail hour, Vanessa made sure every guest knew the staggering financial figures attached to Julian's recent legal victories, while my parents beamed with reflected pride. I stood near the perimeter of the lawn with an untouched drink, watching the familiar family hierarchy play out exactly as it always had. Suddenly, Vanessa spotted me and pulled me into the center of her circle like an amusing afterthought, loudly introducing me as her little courthouse helper. She laughed, telling the affluent crowd that I merely answered phones and filed basic paperwork, causing a few polite smiles to ripple through the wealthy gathering. I felt the familiar urge to nod and let the insult pass, but as I breathed through the discomfort, I noticed Julian wasn't laughing along with the others. His eyes narrowed slightly as he examined my features, a flicker of deep recognition crossing his face as if he were trying to place a half-forgotten memory. Once we were seated for the main course, Vanessa raised her champagne glass for a toast, making a pointed remark about people who argue historic cases versus those who simply stamp documents. She looked directly at me with a challenging smirk, prompting Julian to turn fully in his chair and ask what my actual title was. The entire table fell completely silent, the unexpected question disrupting the carefully rehearsed script of the evening like a sudden tear in a pristine fabric. I stared down at my reflection in the water glass, listening to the low hum of the outdoor heaters while a lifetime of small humiliations flashed through my mind. I remembered the endless nights spent studying complex legal briefs in my dark apartment, realizing that my silence hadn't been protecting my family at all. It had only been protecting their fragile pride, allowing them to comfortably ignore the reality of who I had actually become. I straightened my spine, placed my hands flat on the cool wooden table, and met Julian's intense gaze without a single hint of hesitation or anger. I did not raise my voice, nor did I offer a lengthy defense of my career. I simply told him I was a judge. The single word hung in the air like a sudden drop in barometric pressure, completely halting the surrounding conversations and freezing the movements of everyone at the table. My mother's face turned completely pale within seconds, while my father slowly lowered his wine glass, staring at me as if I were a total stranger. Vanessa let out a sharp, forced laugh, waving her hand dismissively as she told the table that I was clearly making a ridiculous joke. But Julian didn't join in her laughter. Instead, his eyes widened significantly as the missing pieces of his memory instantly snapped into place. He leaned forward, quietly repeating my full name, Judge Clara Vance, before identifying me as the presiding magistrate over his massive corporate dispute from the previous autumn. He looked across the table in absolute awe, praising my fairness, my sharp intellect, and the absolute authority I held over his high-stakes legal team during that grueling trial. Vanessa's smile froze completely as she turned on her fiancé, aggressively insisting that he must be mistaken because I was nothing more than an administrative assistant. Julian calmly corrected her, stating that he knew exactly what a superior court judge looked like, before turning back to me with immense professional respect. My father finally spoke up, his voice thick with disbelief as he asked how long I had been sitting on the bench. I calmly informed him it had been 3 successful years, explaining that I only ever claimed to start as The atmosphere shattered completely as Vanessa realized she had lost total control of the room, her regular audience refusing to offer any comfort or defensive excuses. She stood frozen for a moment, looking at our silent parents, before turning on her heel and storming into the house with her heels clicking angrily against the floor. Julian offered me a respectful, apologetic nod before following her inside, leaving the rest of the family sitting in a heavy, contemplative silence that lasted for the remainder of the evening. My mother quietly reached for my hand, asking why I had hidden my life, and I gently reminded her that they always looked away whenever I tried to speak. The following morning brought a profound sense of liberation, as my phone filled with lengthy text messages and awkward apologies from relatives who suddenly viewed me in a completely new light. Julian even visited my apartment briefly to express his deep respect, admitting that the dinner had forced him to reevaluate many things about his relationship with my sister. A few days later, Vanessa arrived at my door without her usual armor, revealing a vulnerable fear of being ordinary that I had never seen before. We didn't miraculously heal our deep wounds overnight, but the dynamic had permanently shifted, and my family finally began listening to my voice. I spent years believing that shrinking myself to accommodate their ego was an act of kindness, but I finally realized that silence only teaches people how to diminish you. The truth is, you never owe anyone a smaller version of yourself simply to keep their fragile world from shaking. If you have ever hidden your own success to make someone else feel secure, remember that your growth deserves to be celebrated, not hidden. Share your own journey of standing up in the comments below. And if this story resonated with your heart, hit subscribe. You deserve to be fully seen.